Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a special episode of the Welcome to the Thunderdome podcast. Not only is it playoff time, but Christmas is also just around the corner, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of combine those two things. I know we all know the story of, I think it's actually called A Visit from St. Nicholas, but I always thought it was called "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And I was going to just read that to kind of get us in the holiday spirit, but then I thought that would kind of be a waste of time since that has nothing to do with fantasy football. So I kept looking and kind of did a deep dive, and it turns out that there's actually there's a short story here that shockingly applies to our fantasy football league. I don't know how that's possible, but I'm happy that I stumbled upon it. Now it's called A Dome in December by Broderick Lilyhammer. That's definitely not a pen name for me. I didn't write this. Okay, here we go. 'Twas the night before playoffs when all through the league we were listening to Kanye and his talks of blitzkrieg. The members were tinkering with their lineups all day, except for maybe Vic, who was lying face down in some hay. 14 weeks in and 14 weeks out, there's been laughter, name-calling, and a big corruption shout. But before we continue to where we are now, let us go back to the where, the why, and the how. When we all drafted back on Labor Day night, Matt ate a chip that set his stomach alight. His punishment swift, his suffering severe, for being a soaked dirty diaper last year. Everyone drafting with smiles on their faces until their player was stolen, then they'd yell something racist. The draft was completed, their teams were assessed, then it was time to become fully obsessed. First there was Kamish, that's me, who cared way too much. Whenever something happened, his heart he would clutch. Back in week 10, he looked like a schlup when he traded his team away to get Cooper Kupp. Now, schlep means bum, not the one on Urban Dictionary. So don't look that up, it's actually quite scary. Now, Cooper Kupp died, and so did his dream of having yet another trophy-winning team. Now, Kamish sits alone in a pitch-black wet cave, preparing to be just a lemonade slave. Next there was Liv, the commissioner's wife, who reads books about brothers having sex with a knife. That's not just for the rhyme, that's actually true. And it's all fun and games until she reads about poo. But in her spare time, Liv is bumping along in fantasy football, and she'll sing this little song. On Herbert, on Henry, on Lamb, and on Kittle. Singletary, Darius Slayton, and even Curtis Samuel. She yells this in her sleep while chewing on her pillow. A different kind of fantasy is what her dreams billow. But when she is not getting lost in her smut and reading about a pickaxe plugging a butt, Liv is flexing her power, hanging brain in her house, proving just how much better she is than her spouse. Then there was Sam, who for a while looked dead, sitting mid-lower table in his big race car bed. Nights crying, nights praying that something would happen, while having wet dreams about Max Verstappen. From watching his QB, Miami's Tua Tagovailoa, his wiener erupting just like Krakatoa. Then his team came alive like a zombie from hell, thanks to Justin Jefferson, you all know him quite well. Devontae Adams with catch after catch, Sam's hand on the remote and the other mixing a batch. But Sam turned a corner when he decided one day to name his team after the great Bobby Boucher. So at 7-7 and with fire in his eye, he looks to dispose of yet another guy. That guy is Kamish, who he's fought time and again. Just like Randy Savage, time for bringing the pain. Next up is Ben, who soared to a new height after spending last year rolling round in the shite. But while you might think that Ben's building a bomb or speaking in tongues or wiping his ass with a psalm, he's been lurking, learning, and studying close on how to utterly humiliate and do away with his foes. He came back to the league with no pants but shirt collared, and he got the last laugh when he drafted Tony Pollard. Christian McCaffrey, Geno Smith, Travis Kelce, Tyler Lockett, Ramondre Stevenson, and Jerry Jeudy. Ben stormed into fourth on the back of a steer, seemingly fueled by 6 buckets of beer. Santa stopped coming to Ben's basement home because of what he discovered, a leather gimp named Jerome. Next on our list is a fella named Al, whose Diet Pepsi supply could fill the Panama Canal. After sucking a chode in last season prior, has launched into second, propelled by a fire. His team names are always so filthy and gross. Dick jokes, mainly, or something quite close. A litany of names that have made Santa pissed, referring to his pork sword that has never been kissed. Al has the mind of a 14-year-old boy, but the knees of a middle-aged pirate. Ahoy! But you don't need good knees for a fantasy team, just a fridge full of Pepsi and a big diet dream. To be better than all of us young whippersnappers, and for this world to be rid of all those black rappers. So a first-round bye week is what he will earn, and most likely a team name something like Anal Burn. Next we have Vic, my new father-in-law, who's been munching on shit all year like it's chaw. He finds himself at the bottom of a trench. Semen and blood is his dominating stench. There was a time where I thought he had won, when he received Burrow, Pickens, and Zeke from his son. But it mattered not, as he's still in last place. But let's not forget that this isn't a race. For it's the most desperate, most hungry, that make the most dangerous foes, despite 14 weeks of just woes after woes. I insist you remember, he's not just one of 2 geezers, but a man with strange meat that is stocking his freezers. So if he can win maybe 1 or 2 weeks, you best pay attention to those faint floorboard creaks, for the monster is coming and he's coming fast. Or he'll keep sucking and then he'll get last. And then there was Emily, so prim and so proper. Then she'll attack you like a military chopper. Don't take her player off of the waiver wire, or she'll threaten to end you with a shady gun for hire. Year after year, she appears oh so regal, but always ends up like Gollum or Smeagol. She sits in her house atop of her bike, while her husband is out having sex with a pike. She thought to herself, I'm better than this. So she looked at her laptop while clenching her fist. With her second-round pick, she clicked with her talon when she took the world's greatest QB. That's Josh Allen. Win after win, she never looked back. Her eyes started twitching like she's addicted to smack. Her team's 10-4 and she earned a nice bye, tied for the best record. It's corn, just won't die. So watch out for next week, she's just stalking her prey. Let's see which poor fucker that she gets to play. Miss Abby, the children would cry. Their hands were all bloodied and their juice boxes dry. Teaching was always going to take a back seat when Abby had football and people to beat. Her students were frightened. She would kick them like gnomes whenever there was a pick thrown by Patrick Mahomes. Drafting Cook and Dameon Pierce helped give the impression that Abby was fierce. And fierce she remained, finishing in spot number 5. Through all abbreviations, her team continues to thrive. And she went down to Texas for thrills she did seek, along with a man whose name we don't speak. But bounce back she did, and with a thirst for our blood, here comes Miss DQT, Miss Donkey Queef Thud? In a room sits a man with a shiny white coat, who's removing a flashlight from a homeless guy's throat. His methods are odd, and some would call them cruel. But I guess that's what happens after 20 years of school. His name's Matt Morelli, and he likes to fish. But it's a shame that he married such a big, raging, wonderful woman. And his fantasy season has been less than ideal. It's as if he's been clubbed like a cute baby seal. His team name is slang for genital trauma, and if you're not careful, that's what he'll do to your mama. He has Jamar Chase, Miles Sanders, and Brown, and Justin Fields is looking to win his own crown. But it's players like Brady that have caused him much hurt. But at least Matt's marriage isn't buried in dirt. Yet Matt climbs the ranks up to 8 in the table. His vitals are weak, but his vitals are stable. And then there was an elf, right now known as Dobbins, who one night got drunk and offered me a hand job. Ends. His name's Matt Glassmeyer, and he'll say it best, that his season has felt like a cardiac arrest. Despite the first pick at the start of the year, he finds himself taking it right up the rear. Rodgers and D-Hop had been playing with drugs, and JT and Gabe Davis both starting like slugs. But things had started to turn right around when Kenneth Walker III started torching the ground. And despite the success of some of his guys, he's still towards the bottom, which to him, no surprise. He's threatened to quit, and if he gets last once more, he'll probably end up as an East Colfax whore. His team better pick up, it's coming down to the wire, for our new trophy just might be called the Lassmeyer. Now, a jollier tale comes one of a giant who's most likely busy, probably scamming a client. Are you often wondering where he's at, where he went? He's missing indoor for another work event. Getting drunk at a bar where all that they serve is mead in a top hat and an organic hors d'oeuvre. Judge him all you want, he'll pay no attention, because his fantasy team is all that he'll mention. This beast's name is Case, but you'll know him as Zane. For all season, we've been under his crushing reign. His lineup is juicy, borderline unjust, and when you take a look, it's a nut you will bust. Jalen Hurts, Najee Harris, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman, Dalton Schultz, and the Pats D is in full throttle. Atop the mountain he sits, with a bye week to start. That's plenty of time to make a lemongrass tart. But stranger things have happened, and the gods will decide if his grip on us will weaken or if the pain trains in stride. And finally, there's one that has dropped from the earth. For all that we know, he could be living in Perth. His name is Colin, or the Villain for short, and if there was an HR, he would file a report. Colin exploded like a volcano of rage, and when he erupted, he was booed off the stage. He wanted the commission's head on a stake and to shit in his coffin when he came to the wake. But that's the last time we heard of our sprightly young friend, whose life may have come to some blunt, tragic end. Just think of all the players that he gets to use. Trevor Lawrence, Chris Olave, and Saquon Barkley's lit fuse. You've got Christian Watson, and Bam Knight looks fully loaded. And especially as of late, Amon-Ra has exploded. So come back to us, friend. You've disappeared from our chats. I just hope you're not in an alley getting eaten by rats. The temperature has dropped, the snow starts to fall. It's the best time of year for playoff football. So those who get byes, rest well, but stay sharp, for the next sound you hear won't be that of a harp. A grizzled survivor will be your next fighter, who'll knock on your door with a spray can and lighter. We don't know what will happen. Fantasy football is unstable. But what we do know for sure is there will be a new head at the table. So good luck to us all. May you put up a fight. Merry playoffs to all, and to all a good night. Thank you. Or should I say, thank you, Broderick Lilyhammer. Okay, now let's get into the football. It'll be a little bit short of a recap today because there are 4 of us, or I should say 4 of you, definitely not me, who get to sit back and relax on your bye week this week. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the matchups, starting with me versus Sam. Starting with me, I had Brandon Ayuk go last night against Seattle. He only mustered up 2 catches for 19 yards and 3.9. Sweet. I opted out of playing Brock Purdy, who I picked up off the waiver wire. He was questionable coming into the game. I didn't know how he was going to play on the road in a tough place like Seattle. Spoiler alert, he did just fine. He got just under 24 points on my bench. That's not good. Before I dive into all the matchups, I wanted just to highlight a couple here that I thought were good for both me and Sam. The first being Mike White against Detroit. Again, he's also questionable coming into the game, but he has a really great matchup if he does end up playing. Detroit's given up over 400 yards per game, and they have just one of the worst defenses in football. So it's a great spot for Mike White and the Jets if he's healthy to throw. He got split in half on 2 separate occasions against Buffalo last week, and he's got some rib pain. So we'll see if he ends up playing. The next is Alvin Kamara versus Atlanta. Mark Ingram is out, the backup running back, so he's not going to be competing for touches. Atlanta only ranks 19th against running backs. I think it's a good value play for him. I think it's a good volume play for him. I'm hoping they utilize him, and it's because it's a good matchup on paper. And then the other one I really liked for myself on paper anyway was Isaiah Pacheco against Houston. Houston ranks last in the leagues in terms of how many yards per carry they give up, fantasy points to running backs they give up, and touchdowns to running backs they give up. So it's a great matchup for Pacheco. I hope he doesn't get cucked too bad like he did last week to Jerick McKinnon. But if they do it right and they run the ball, it should be good for him there. Others that I've got going right now, I'm going with Elijah Moore at wide receiver for now against that bad Detroit defense. If Corey Davis, fellow wide receiver on the Jets there, does not play, it should be a good day for Elijah Moore. With Davis being out last week, Moore saw 10 targets. If he can get somewhere around there again against this bad Lions team, it could be a good day for him. Now, I did pick up Taysom Hill at tight end. It scares me a little bit because Taysom Hill either gets 3 points or he gets 40, and there's really no in between. So I read that they were trying to come up with plays to get him more involved than they had been this season, and they just had a bye week to kind of figure that out. So there's definitely some upside there. Atlanta's just not good. Taysom Hill could line up at quarterback this game for all I know at some point. He could throw, he could line up as a running back, wide receiver, tight end. I don't know how they're going to use him. I just hope that they do use him. And then I've got Deontay Foreman going at my flex, playing a Pittsburgh team that just lost one of their best pass rushers and one of their best D-line guys. So it's the possibility for a decent day is there. We saw way too much of Chuba Hubbard last week for my liking, and he took a lot of the game out for Deontay Foreman. But if they utilize Foreman, I think it could be an okay day for him. And then finally, the Philly defense against Chicago. I also did pick up the Washington defense, who has the Giants. I don't know how tough Chicago's going to play Philly, but I think they're going to get some points out of them. So I'm not super confident in Philly's defense this week. That being said, they still are the number 3 defense in fantasy. They're getting about 10 points every game, which is good and solid. I just hope that they can contain Justin Fields and some of those other better guys in the Chicago offense. So I'm projected at 79 points right now. That's really, really bad. And I'm assuming, it's because Mike White is out. I'm learning that just for right now. So, fuck. That sucks. Okay, well, yeah, I'm going to lose. But let's look at Sam's matchups and see why I'm about to just get my ass handed to me. A couple matchups I wanted to highlight in Sam's lineup there. He's got some tough matchups, but it looks like it's not going to matter. But I'll just go ahead and highlight the big ones that I liked here. The first being James Conner against the Broncos. Now, Denver's allowing 4.6 yards per carry to running backs. And James Conner also just terrorized the New England rush defense, where they were a top 3 in the league, and he finished with 2 touchdowns and like 20-something points. So he gets a much easier matchup this week in Denver. And given that Kyler Murray tore his ACL and it's going to be Colt McCoy, I think they're going to try to rely on the run, especially against this Denver secondary, which is one of the better ones in the league. So it should be a great script for James Conner. I like Brian Robinson Jr. Against the Giants. They actually played the Giants 2 weeks ago before their bye, and he finished with 111 yards. I can't see a situation in which that doesn't happen again here. He should chew them up. He's overtaken Antonio Gibson for the number one role in that rushing offense. So it should be just fine for Brian Robinson Jr. And the other one's Justin Jefferson. If you look at the matchup, it's not great. The Colts have only allowed the second fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but it's just Justin Jefferson, man. He's matchup proof. They're going to be trying to get the ball in his hands. There's no way that Minnesota doesn't try to pass the ball in this game. JJ is just the man, so I have to be kind of afraid for that one. And then looking at Sam's other matchups here, he's going with Tua against Buffalo. That's going to be a tough one for him. Tua has yet to play Buffalo well, and I don't know how well Tua is going to play in the cold. It's supposedly supposed to be like up to 8 inches of snow in Buffalo on Saturday night. It's going to be freezing here. Earlier this season, the Miami bench had these giant space heaters to keep their players warm, and it was 50 degrees that day. So how are they going to look in Buffalo? And it's probably going to be like 15 degrees that night. I'm not in love with Tua or Miami in this game, but given that Sam's backup option is Kirk Cousins, playing in a quote primetime game against the Colts, I don't blame him for making that decision either. It's kind of a pick your poison kind of thing. I think David Montgomery should be okay against Philly. I know Philly's a tough defense, but if Chicago stays in this game and keeps it close, which I think is very possible, being the game being in Chicago, then Montgomery definitely has some value. Philly has proven to be beaten on the ground, and that's definitely where they're a little bit weaker rather than their secondary. But again, it's all going to come down to how close Chicago keeps this. If they don't get down 2 touchdowns and get completely phased out of the run game, then I think it's I think there's a good potential there for Montgomery. Who I'm less enthused about is Devontae Adams, who gets New England. I've said it several times, and if you just kind of know how Belichick and the Pats secondary work, Belichick's plan is to double cover the best wide receiver on the other team. He's done it every game this season. He's done it to Diggs. He's done it to just pretty much every good player. Did it to D-Hop earlier. So I'm not in love with Devontae Adams this week. He's going to have his work cut out for him. But kind of like Justin Jefferson, though, he's matchup proof for the most part. They're going to have to get the ball in his hands somehow to be competitive in this game. The Raiders don't have a whole lot else going for them. I'm not sure how much success they're going to have on the ground. Even though they did just kind of get chewed up on the ground last week by James Conner. But overall, it's probably not a favorable matchup for Devontae Adams. Now it could be for T.J. Hawkinson. In that game against the Colts do kind of flaunt a pretty stout secondary, but I could see this being a game in which they have to get the ball off quickly and just little short dump off passes in which Hawkinson's going to excel for sure. So could be decent there. And then finally for Sam, he did pick up the Saints defense, which I think is one of the better plays this week for sure. Atlanta just lost Marcus Mariota to the IR. They're playing a rookie quarterback. Atlanta's defense was already not only really run heavy, but pretty weak in general. It's one of the lower offenses in the league. So it's a great game script potentially for New Orleans to shut these guys down and force some turnovers. So it's a good play for Sam. So overall, I am going to have to figure out what to do here because I was not anticipating on Mike White being out because everything I read said he was going to play. I'm projected to get fucking stomped, and the fact that I didn't play Brock Purdy last night is not good. So I'm going to have to make a play at quarterback somewhere, but I can't see where Sam doesn't win comfortably here. So my downward spiral continues, which I'm sure a lot of you are probably happy about. All right, next we have Colin and Matt Morelli. Now let me see here. Colin is projected at 119.5 to Matt's 124.1. So closer than me and Sam's matchup by a mile, but Matt does get the favor here. Let's see what I wrote down for matchups I wanted to emphasize. Oh, let's see. God, it would help if I could actually read too. Here we go. So let's start with Colin. Saquon Barkley versus Washington. Washington's a tough defense, and I do like them to win at home this week. But Saquon didn't have any problems with them 2 weeks ago when they played. He finished with 19.1. They're going to be all that whole offense goes through Saquon anyway. So I could see something similar there. It should be a close game. Should be fairly low scoring, I imagine. So Saquon's going to be active the whole time and getting the touches. So I think you like his matchup there. And the only other one that I really wanted to highlight for Colin was the Broncos defense against Arizona. Again, Kyler Murray's out for the season. It's Colt McCoy. McCoy got just absolutely smothered by New England's defense last week. New England's defense finished with like 20-something points, forced a shitload of turnovers. That could very well happen in this one. I think if the Cardinals aren't able to get it done on the ground, which they're definitely going to try, then they could get in a situation in which they have to throw the ball, and against our Denver secondary could be bad news for them. So I think the Broncos are a really good play this week. Okay, and then let's just go over the rest here for Colin. He's got Latavius Murray against Arizona. It's tough to trust anybody in that shitty Broncos offense, especially at running back. But that being said, Arizona's rush defense is very beatable. So if the Broncos try to run the ball, and it looks like it's probably going to be mostly Latavius Murray, he could have a little bit of success. He had 3 straight weeks where he finished with double-digit fantasy points, having 17, 13, and then 17 again carries. We could see something like that against Arizona, but I think overall he's probably going to have to get in the end zone to have a respectable fantasy day. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a monster of late. Now he's played some pretty favorable defenses here recently with Buffalo, Jacksonville, Minnesota, and he's been putting up big points then. But he gets a top-tier secondary in the Jets this week, so I think you have to temper expectation just a little bit because the Jets have been very, very good at keeping opposing wide receivers at bay. And whereas I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, and both teams are going to have to throw the ball, they may not be able to get the ball in St. Brown's hands as much as they had been lately. So, but he's just the guy. Obviously, they're gonna try to get the ball in his hands, and they're gonna have to, I think, to be successful. But he's gonna get the Sauce Gardner coverage, which throughout this season has been bad for whoever that offensive matchup is for Gardner. So don't love that one. I don't love Chris Olave this week either. This is a game where I think New Orleans is going to, I pray to God, is try to get the ball in Kamara's hands, and I think that's where they're going to be successful. Because Atlanta they're not great, but they do have fairly capable secondary and safety positions. And whereas Olave is the guy in that offense, and that's where they're going to be taking their shots to, I just don't quite love his matchup this week. I think he gets just a little bit of a downgrade. Juwan Johnson, sticking with the Saints, he was coming in questionable. He practiced a little bit yesterday, which is a good sign. He'll probably play today. I like him a little bit more than Olave. He's one of the more prolific red zone targets for the Saints. Again, I think it's kind of touchdown or bust for him. He'd done it in 3 out of the 4 weeks. He didn't do it against a tough San Francisco team, which is fair, but he has an opportunity to do it against Atlanta, and they obviously like getting him in the end zone and getting him the ball in the red zone. So I don't hate Juwan Johnson this week. It's tough not to like Christian Watson, who has just been insane. He's got 7 touchdowns in his last 4 games. All of those 4 games, he's been over 20 fantasy points. And that probably won't change against a Rams team that has been exploited in their secondary. The only issue I have here is that he was doing all this with a pretty depleted wide receiver core there in Green Bay, and he's got Alan Lazard to compete with now, and he's got Romeo Dobbs' back. So if Green Bay's smart, they should keep throwing Watson the ball because he's been just scoring for fun. I just wonder if there's just a more a more mouths to feed kind of situation in Green Bay there that Rodgers might be trying to take advantage of, especially with the Rams. And I'm assuming Jalen Ramsey is probably going to get Christian Watson. We could see Jalen Ramsey on Lazard too, but I don't know. I think that one's okay. I think there's enough value there for it to be okay. All right, that was it for Colin. So let's move on to Matt. Let me see what I had written here for Matt. He's got actually probably a few more favorable matchups in my opinion. The first being Miles Sanders against Chicago. Miles Sanders is having a career year. He's scoring very often, and the Bears give up the fifth most rushing yards to running backs. So I think he's going to get in the end zone in this game. He's their first choice in the red zone. They're going to run him early, and especially if they get into a situation in which they get ahead, which is very possible whenever Philly plays anybody, then they can start leaning on Miles Sanders, and it's exactly that situation is why Miles Sanders has been so effective this year. So I think it's very reasonable to expect something like that to happen again here against a pretty beatable Bears team. Next I have written down here is fellow Eagle A.J. Brown. He has touchdowns in 3 straight games. He's the main man in this, and probably the best offense in football right now. I don't see where they're going to be able to contain him. I like him to score, and I think you love A.J. Brown in this game as well. And then the other one I have here is Jamar Chase against Tampa Bay. Now, last season you'd hate anybody against Tampa Bay, but this year Tampa just does not look the same at all, and it's a miracle they're winning their division because they suck. It's just that NFC South is just fucking awful. AFC South, NFC South. Yeah, that NFC South is just terrible. But you got to love Jamar Chase in this game. Just last week, the Tampa Bay got wrecked by the 49ers in Brock Purdy's first game. Touchdowns by both Deebo Samuel and by Brandon Ayuk. And it's not like the Bengals are short at the wide receiver position. I mean, they have fucking Jamar Chase. They got Joe Burrow thrown to him. It's one of the more pass happy offenses in football. So having Jamar Chase in this matchup, I think you absolutely love it. All right, and let me see here who else Matt is rolling with this week. Cam Akers, it's tough. He's finally become like the guy in LA. And I think he's just going to need a touchdown to have a decent day, which is possible against Green Bay. They're one of the 5 teams in the league that are giving up at least 5 yards per carry. With Baker Mayfield coming in, I'm not sure what the new game plan is going to be. I know Baker's probably going to want to pass to show that he's not just like a washed up fucker, and we saw that last week. But if they get in the red zone, they're going to give Akers the ball, and I think if they can keep it close, which I'm not entirely sure the Rams are going to be able to do, at Lambeau on Monday night. But I think Akers could sneak in for a touchdown there. It all just depends how close the Rams keep this one. Evan Ingram. Now, I know Evan Ingram was like the tight end of the millennium fucking last week against Tennessee. He had 162 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 41 points. And that's great, but he's not going to do that this week against Dallas. There's just no way. In Dallas, that they have the best defense in football. They're going to that they're going to be looking at that tape, seeing why Ingram fucking exploded, and they're going to be making it a point to make sure that doesn't happen again. I don't like Jacksonville in this game. I think they could potentially keep it close. Fucking Houston somehow gave Dallas a game last week, but I think that was more kind of like an anomaly, and Dallas is going to be tightened up here, especially at home. So I'm not as enthused about Evan Ingram. Nor am I really about Juju Smith-Schuster either. Houston is playing tough despite having one win, and somehow they've only given up 4 touchdowns all year to wide receivers. They have one of the better secondaries in the league statistically, which doesn't make any sense because that team's so bad. But yeah, I'm not in love with really any wide receivers against them, especially Juju. This feels like a game in which they're just going to throw to Kelsey 10,000 times and just kind of avoid those deep shots to keep it out of the secondary's hands for the most part. But they'll probably, Mahomes always takes his deep shots, and he's going to take a couple to Juju. So if he can get his hands on the ball and bring some down, then he could have an okay day. But I think you gotta just kind of level out your expectations here for Juju. And then Kansas City defense against Houston. I think you're more than comfortable playing anybody against Houston. I know they did give Dallas a scare last week and put up like 20-something points against the best defense in football. Again, I think that's kind of just an anomaly. I don't think they're going to do that against Kansas City. Kansas City almost got embarrassed by the Broncos yesterday by giving up like 28 points, whatever it was. I think they're going to. I think kind of similar to what I was talking about with the Dallas defense. I think the Chiefs are going to kind of lock it down a little bit more and play tougher. So I don't hate the streaming play there for Kansas City's defense. So yeah, overall, Matt's projected to win by a little bit. This could be potentially close. But on paper, you just have to favor Matt with Miles Sanders, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown. I think he's just got the better matchups, and it would be a big win for Matt, who's really come alive here in the last couple weeks of the season. And if you remember from last year, Emily did the same thing. She limped into the playoffs with a bullet hole in her ass and fucking covered in mud and in the 12th seed and made it to the semifinal. So it's not unrealistic that Matt could do something similar here. He's getting big results here in the important part of our season. Alrighty, moving on here to Vic versus Abby, who has not been having a great end to their season is Vic, who has lost 8 of his last 9, I believe, and comes into this one against Abby, who has been flying here to end the season in the 5th seed. Vic is projected at 112.3 to Abby's 122.7. Now, some matchups that I wanted to highlight here for both of these is Vic. We'll start here. Joe Burrow versus Tampa Bay. Talked about it with Jamar Chase. Tampa Bay got killed by Brock Purdy. He should get killed by Joe Burrow. Just the offensive weapons in that Bengals team. I really like Joe Burrow in this game. Who I like as well is Ezekiel Elliott against Jacksonville. The Jags have been murdered on the ground this year. Derrick Henry has just killed them all year. I mean, it's Derrick Henry, but still, this is a pretty run-heavy offense in Dallas. The Jags have allowed the 7th most touchdowns to running backs. I know Tony Pollard kind of complicates that situation a little bit, but we're really seeing a pretty even split, and Zeke is not suffering on the touchdown front, even with Pollard being in there. So I love Zeke to get in this one, and I think he's going to do just fine against a weak Jags rush defense. And then the other one for Vic I wanted to touch on was the Bills defense against Miami. This all is set up for just like a Bills. These are situations in which the Bills thrive. It's prime time, Saturday night. It's going to be like fucking 20 degrees and snow. Bills fans are going to be going nuts. This is Buffalo in a nutshell here. And against a Miami team where their players very clearly don't like playing in the cold. Tua has never once played well against the Bills. I don't think Tua likes playing in the cold. He's from fucking Hawaii. He played in Alabama. I don't think Tua is going to thrive in the cold, which all is a great recipe for a Bills D masterclass, I think. But we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the rest of Vic's players here, we'll go with Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams, he's, if anything, he's efficient. You're not going to get a huge day out of him. You're definitely not lately, but he's still finding ways to just fall into the end zone. It's because they do the work to get down to the red zone, and then he just runs in. So we're seeing a lot of 30 yards and a touchdown from Jamal Williams. It's good for 10 fantasy points. I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for him here against the Jets, who just flash just a really, really good defense. But in a game that should have a lot of points, I'd be surprised if Williams wasn't one of these touchdowns for those reasons I was just talking about. I think they get down close. Williams should just be able to bust in, and I think you're going to get a 10-ish points day out of him. You absolutely love Terry McLaurin this week. He just played. They're coming off a bye, but right before the bye, they played the Giants again, and he crushed them. 12 catches, 105 yards. Or I'm sorry, 8 catches, 105 yards and a touchdown. That was good for 26.5 fantasy points. They're playing at home, Sunday Night Football. Watch what happens with Scary Terry this week. He should be able to do that exact same thing against the Giants. Isaiah McKenzie against Miami is kind of a little bit of a trickier one. He's that third man in the Buffalo receiving core. They just re-signed Cole Beasley, so I'm not quite sure what McKenzie's role is going to be now. He might kind of just fade into the background. But he does return the punts. He returns the kickoffs. So you could potentially get something there. And in a game in which they're going to put all their focus on Diggs and the secondary focus is going to be on Gabe Davis, I think you could see some slot action here from Isaiah McKenzie. And I wouldn't expect too much out of him here, but we've seen a couple big games out of him, so it's not impossible for sure. And then let's see here, Mark Andrews. He's the number 2 tight end in fantasy, but I don't like him this week. They're playing in Cleveland. Now, the last time they played Cleveland, they focused all of their attention on him. He had no catches on 2 targets for 0.4 fantasy points. They're gonna try to shut him down again. There's no Lamar Jackson. It's going to be Tyler Huntley again this week. So I'm not a big Ravens believer. I almost think that Cleveland are going to beat these guys at home, and I think it's going to be tough for Mark Andrews to play a big role when they already completely locked him down once before. Allen Lazard against the Rams. I think this is a decent matchup here. I talked about it earlier with Colin and Christian Watson. I think the same thing applies to Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is definitely kind of taking a backseat to Watson on the touchdown front, but that might actually play in his favor now that I think he has the potential to get more looks. As like I said, Jalen Ramsey's probably going to be on Christian Watson in this game. He might be a little bit on Lazard. But the introduction of the reintroduction rather of Romeo Doubs kind of makes this a little bit more complicated for Lazard. I'll be curious to see who they try to throw the ball to in this game. But luckily for Vic, that Green Bay should be throwing the ball in this game. I think that's how they're going to beat LA. Okay, that is good for Vic. Now let's move on to Miss Abby. Let's see here. Just the tougher matchups for Abby, but two here that I like in particular. The first being Amari Cooper against Baltimore. It's still crazy. The home and away splits for Amari Cooper are crazy. He's way better at home. He gets a favorable matchup here at home against a Baltimore team that allows the 8th most points to wide receivers. Deshaun Watson, I think, is kind of starting to figure it out a little bit more. He was much better last week than he was in the week prior. Granted, he missed 700 and something days of football, and they just threw him right in, which I thought was stupid. But he'll be taking some shots at Amari Cooper this week, so watch out for that. And I think he's got a good spot there. And the other one is T. Higgins if he is healthy. I know he is questionable with a hamstring, which is a little concerning, but from what I've read, he expects to play, and I think you love T. Higgins against Tampa Bay. You know Tampa's going to be putting most 90% of their focus on Jamar Chase, which should leave plenty of room for Higgins, who has not faltered or suffered since getting Jamar Chase back into that team. And Tampa Bay has they've allowed plenty of scores all year to wide receivers. So I do like Higgins this week. You got to like Mahomes against Houston for sure. I know I said that how few touchdowns Houston have given up to wide receivers. I don't think anybody stops Mahomes. Nobody's done it all year. You can give him the toughest of matchups, and he's going to excel. So yeah, you don't hate Mahomes against the 1-11 or whatever they are Texans. Dalvin Cook against Indy is not too bad. It's not the greatest matchup, but it's not the worst. I'm curious as to how Minnesota's going to play this game because Indy's way tougher against wide receivers, but they're good and solid against running backs too. So I think this is touchdown or bust for Cook this week. I don't think that he's going to be able just to like run these guys to death, and it's not going to be a huge volume thing with him this week. But I do think the game is close, and he should be plenty active, and I think you can expect him to hopefully get a touchdown this week. I'm not even going to pretend like I know who this guy is or how to pronounce his name. It's Dare Ogunbowale. He's one of like the 3 Houston Texans guys that are going to be running the ball this week. Unfortunately for Abby, Dameon Pierce is out with an ankle sprain, and she picked up just another guy in this team here. I wouldn't expect anything out of this. Like I said, I think there's like 3 different guys who are going to be carrying the ball in Houston, and against a Kansas City team, it's tough to expect anything out of that one. Okay, Pat Freiermuth against Carolina. Now he is dealing with a bit of an injury, and I believe he did not practice yesterday, which is not a great sign that he's gonna suit up against Carolina on Sunday. If somehow he does, it's a decent matchup, especially because Kenny Pickett is out with a concussion, and I think they're going to be going with Rudolph. And in those situations in which you get backup QBs and third string QBs in games where they have to throw the ball, it's a ton of throws to the running backs, ton of throws to the tight ends. So if Freiermuth is healthy, I think there's value there, but it's not looking great just from what I have read anyway. Next up is Zay Jones. Now Zay Jones has had a great couple weeks here. He had 21. Almost 22 fantasy points and a touchdown against Tennessee last week. It's going to be tougher for him against Dallas this week. Like I said, I'm a big Dallas Cowboy believer when they play at home, especially their defense just seems to play way better at home, and after almost losing to the Houston Texans last week and almost there being like the upset of the year. I like Dallas in this game, so I think Jones has the value in which Jacksonville's going to have to throw the ball, and he'll probably get a few targets, but he's not going to be able to capitalize on that matchup like he did in Tennessee last week. Then finally is the Carolina defense. I actually like this play. Going back to what I just said, no Kenny Pickett for Pittsburgh. They're going with Rudolph, I believe. I think he's now their 3rd string, technically. And in Carolina's defense has been good and solid, and the Pittsburgh offense is not. So I think this is as reasonable as a streaming play as there is this week. So overall, Abby definitely has the favorable matchups, but there's some sneaky value there for Vic where I keep a close eye on this one. I think Vic has the potential this week to put up a much closer fight than he has been, and I will give the lean to Abby. She just has the better team, but don't be surprised if this thing is close and Abby gets a little bit of a scare here this week. All right, and then finally we have Matt Glassmeyer versus M, who both had some action last night on Thursday Night Football. I'll just cover those real quick, starting with Matt. He had Kenneth Walker, who was mostly unsuccessful. He only rushed for 47 yards, but he did finish with just about 12 fantasy points, where a flex play, that's not too bad. But it was nothing compared to Liv, who had a big day out of her two guys. George Kittle had 2 touchdowns on 93 yards for 28.3, and Metcalf had a decent day, 7 catches, 55 yards for 12.5. So it was a good start for both, but a particularly good start for Liv. And then the other matchups I wanted to stand out here. Fuck is it? Oh, there we go. We'll start with Matt. Dak Prescott versus the Jags. Jags allow the 8th most points per drive. If Dallas doesn't just run these guys to death like they have been doing lately to everybody, then I like Dak because Jacksonville is beatable on both sides of the coin there, of run and pass. So I like Dak to throw the ball in this game. I think he'll have success if he decides to do so. He's got the options to be successful there. The other one who I love, who I think is one of the best wide receiver matchups of the week, is Keenan Allen against the Titans. Tennessee's just horrible. They got murdered last week in the air by Jacksonville. And Keenan Allen's looked great now that he's finally healthy too. So I love the Chargers in this game. They have their wide receiver cores healthy, and I think Keenan Allen has a big day. And then the last one for Matt here that I liked was Jonathan Taylor against Minnesota. They have a very beatable rush defense. I think he's going to get plenty of work. That Colts offense just isn't great, but I do think they're going to be able to keep it somewhat close against Minnesota thanks to their decent defense. And if they do keep it close, then most of that offense is going to go through Jonathan Taylor. So I think it's a total volume play here for him, and I think it's one that you actually like. All right, let's finish through Matt's matchups here. Aaron Jones against LA. Now LA has been decent against running backs, but as a pass catching running back, I think that's where Aaron Jones is going to have some success here. I think it's going to be volume. I don't see a situation in which they're not going to be able to use him in this game. And like I said, it's Monday Night Football at Lambeau. I like the game script for Green Bay here and for Aaron Jones to be able to get the volume he needs for a decent fantasy day. I am not quite as in love with D-Hop this week against the Broncos. I know the Broncos got murdered by Mahomes last week, but that's going to be a much, much more different situation as Arizona's got Colt McCoy. I just don't see where they're going to be able to get D-Hop the ball in this game very often, especially because he's going to get the Pat Surtain blanket, and Surtain has been just lights out against the stud wide receivers this year. So he's going to be on D-Hop, and I'm just not in love with any pass catcher on Arizona here. So I think that's going to be a tougher day for him. Bellinger against Washington, he is questionable, but I think likely to play. He wasn't great last week against Philly, but that was to be expected. Philly's tough. And he had 5 catches for 24 yards the week prior against Washington, who he gets this week. I think that's reasonable. Whereas I don't think the Giants are going to have a ton of success in this game. They seem to like to throw to Bellinger, and Washington, they present a pretty heavy pass rush, and they've been getting to quarterbacks. So in these games where it's going to be probably a lot of Daniel Jones either scrambling himself, handing off to Saquon, or probably dumping off the ball to Bellinger, I think there's just enough value for maybe 6-7-ish points if he doesn't get in the end zone. And then finally, the Baltimore defense against Cleveland. I think it's an okay play. This game probably is going to suck. I think it's going to be low scoring. I really do think Cleveland's going to beat these guys just with how little Baltimore's got going on right now. But it is Deshaun Watson who's still trying to get reacclimated into playing football. So I think there's going to be a turnover or two there. But I don't think it's going to be like a big booming game for these guys like it was last week against Pittsburgh. I think they're going to get a little bit more capable offense to try to handle this week. So it's okay. I think it's like a middle of the pack option for defense. All right, that is Matt done. So let me just finish off with Liv here. We'll start with Justin Herbert, who I absolutely love. Against Tennessee, who sucks so much in the air and against the pass. And now that Herbert has almost his full arsenal of offensive weapons to choose from now, he has several ways that he can smack around this Tennessee secondary. So I think it's one of the best options at quarterback this week, and Liv should be excited for that. On the other side of the ball there, Derrick Henry against that Chargers team, I think you like him too. As long as Tennessee doesn't get shit blasted in this game, which is potentially a possibility. But if Tennessee can keep this thing within reason, it's going to be a lot of Derrick Henry. The Chargers give up a league high 5.5 yards per carry to opposing running backs. That always spells great for Derrick Henry, who's such a bulldog, and yards after contact too is where he excels. So as long as game script allows for it, I think you love Derrick Henry. And then the other one I wanted to highlight was CeeDee Lamb against Jacksonville. Jacksonville goes up to the third most touchdowns to wide receivers, and it all just comes down to if the Cowboys decide to utilize the pass in this game, which they really should, because that's definitely an avenue in which Jacksonville can be beat. And CeeDee Lamb's a freak. Like get that guy the ball and watch what happens. That he's a stud. So if they do it right, I think you love CeeDee Lamb this week. And then there's just a few I haven't touched on here with Liv. One being Devin Singletary. I don't love him this week. I don't like any running back in that game, really, just because both running games have been just kind of not great lately with them in Miami. And Singletary in particular, because he's got James Cook in the mix now, who's been getting more and more carries. You might see a Buffalo attempt to rush more than often just because there's supposed to, maybe be 8 inches of snow in this game, and they might try to run the ball. But Miami's been decent against the run, and I don't see that being where the Bills are going to be successful. So it's hard to love Singletary this week. And the same kind of goes for Michael Carter too. Zonovan Knight. I forget that it's Zonovan, not Donovan. Has taken over this backfield, and even with that, I just don't love the matchup against Detroit, who in the last 6 weeks have presented the fourth best rush defense in football. They've really tightened it up in that side of their game. So in a game where I think it's going to have a lot of points, I think this game's going to be all in the air, probably at least from the Jets side. But Mike White's not even playing, so they might try to run the ball. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. It's going to be Flacco, probably, unless they're going to go back and trust Zach Wilson. I have no fucking clue what they're going to do in this one. So that being said, I still just don't love Carter against Detroit. Detroit's got a good rush defense. That was what I was trying to essentially land at. And then finally, Green Bay's defense. I think this is a good streaming option this week. Liv asked me about this when she picked him up. I think there's value here for sure. I like Green Bay at Lambeau against a team led by Baker Mayfield, who just got there 5 days ago. He has very short amount of time to learn the playbook. He gets a fairly staunch defense in Green Bay, so I think there's good value here. I think there's turnover value here for it to be a decent streaming option. So after everything, Liv's projected at 137.8 to Matt's 123, and I think that's probably fair. Liv got off to such a great start last night on Thursday Night Football. To be up 40 to 12 essentially is a great start, and I think Liv has enough matchups to and enough of a good start to see her over the line here. So we'll see if that holds true. Alrighty, well that is going to do it for our matchups. But in case you guys are wondering kind of what potential matchups for next week are going to look like, I have written it down just so you don't have to look. The winner of me and Sam will go on to play Al next week. The winner of Vic and Abby are going to play Ben. The winner of Colin and Matt Morelli are going to play Case. Godspeed to one of you. And then the winner of Matt Glassmeyer and Liv is going to go on to play M. Because Casey is the number 1 seed, got the bye. M is the number 2, got a bye. Al is the number 3, and then Ben is the number 4. Both are in bye weeks this week. All right, well, that will go ahead and officially wrap it up for the pod this week. Thank you guys for being patient with me. I'm sorry for all the technical difficulties. Unfortunately, that just kind of happens sometimes. I'll try not to get fucking copyright struck again for some reason. The reason it happened last time, and I don't know why, is because in the background of the first time I did the pod, I just had like, you know when you put on your TV like a fucking lit fireplace? I had that playing in the background the whole time, and it copyrighted it. I don't know why, but I couldn't edit it out because the sound was already mixed into like my voice and shit, so there was no way around it. Had to record the fucking pod. But thank you. I really appreciate you being patient with me. Thanks for letting me get it out again. Thank you for listening to my bullshit at the start. And thanks for always tuning into the podcast and the emails. With next week being the week before Christmas, I have more Christmas themed stuff planned for the email and for the pod again. So I encourage you to keep listening, keep reading, because I'm really excited for that coming up. So, thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend. Good luck in your matchups. I'll be back with you on Tuesday. Take care.